The New South Wales Labor government will hand down its first budget since 2010 today. Treasurer Daniel Mookhey is adamant the state will return to surplus in 3 years, despite $18 billion in new spending and an $8 billion budget shortfall expected this financial year. What we know so far is Western Sydney will be one of the biggest winners in this budget, where billions of dollars has been allocated to schools and hospitals. Wage increases have also been promised for the public sector workers. Question marks remain, though, on whether the government plans to forge ahead with the Sydney Metro West project or how much taxpayers will fork out to keep the Eraring power station open. And joining us live now is the New South Wales Shadow Treasurer, Damien Tudorhope. Damien, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So let's start with, I guess this is probably two separate things. What sort of budget are you expecting as opposed to what are you hoping for today?
Well, I'm expecting a budget which delivers for the union bosses who have, in fact, supported Labor's rise to the Treasury benches. So they're delivering for the commitments which they made to the union movement in relation to wage rises. And what we do see is that there is potentially $10 billion in unfunded wage commitments which have got to be met by the government, and most of the cuts which are being made today for the purposes of making sure that those commitments to the union movement can be met. What I say in terms of what we would have liked to have seen is the vision for New South Wales which existed with the previous government for the purposes of a continuation of the delivery of infrastructure. Under the previous government, we in fact renovated the state, and wherever you go there were new hospitals, new schools, new roads and new rail networks, and that was a legacy of the previous government, where we managed to have fiscal responsibility at the same time as being able to deliver a renovated state. I think that will go by the wayside today because we have commitments to others which in fact necessitate the cutting or cancelling of many of those projects.
Was the COVID cost blowouts, though, fiscal responsibility? I mean, does that fall under that umbrella?
Well, there's no doubt that COVID certainly was something which impacts on the ability of governments to reduce debt. But there is an expectation in the community that we responded to the COVID pandemic, and certainly the way that we did it, I think, in many respects, showed that we did it in a way which was probably better than any other jurisdiction in Australia, and that was evidenced by the ratings agencies after the pandemic still retaining New South Wales AAA credit ratings. Now, that is the objective standard that you look for the purposes of establishing the quality of fiscal management. What do others say about, what's the credit opinion that others look to for the purpose of the way that you run an economy?
So, no doubt all of that was needed in a very, very, very uncertain time, but that bill needs to be paid off now, and there is, as I just mentioned earlier, the expectation that we could well return to surplus in the next 3 years, could be back in the black. Are you that optimistic?
Oh, well, it remains to be seen. A lot of the potential additional revenue which the government will be expecting and which will be building into that optimism for a surplus is built on probably additional GST revenue, and GST revenue is underpinned by inflationary pressures. So that's the challenge. The challenge that the government has to do is to try and keep inflation under control in circumstances where they want a surplus. And one of the big impacts on inflation, of course, is unbridled wage rises, and in fact the wage price spiral is a common problem which exists in relation to any economy.
But weren't those wage rises needed? You know, in a high inflation environment, were those wage rises not needed?
There's no doubt that whatever government was in charge of the Treasury benches, you had to look at the manner in which you managed wage rises. We, in fact, had already indicated that we were prepared to move the wage cap, and we had done so in the last budget. But now there is no cap in relation to wages. But the government came to power on a circumstances where it said to the people, we will fund wage rises for the public sector by productivity improvements. Now, they have yet to identify one productivity measure from the public sector to justify the wage rises. Now, I agree that there had to be an increase or at least an acknowledgement of the pressures on public sector workers, but there is no commitment to make sure we have that under control.
Okay. Damien Tudhope, the New South Wales Shadow Treasurer, thanks for your time this morning. That budget lock-up begins very soon, but we'll have Kenny Heatley covering it in just a few moments.